Hello there, friends. It is Jimmie Maverick coming at you with the Fantasy Frenzy podcast. And on the phone, I've got my good friend Swami Rob. Swami, how you doing?
I'm all right, man. How about you?
I'm doing really good. So pretty good Super Bowl we had this past weekend. I got to say that was a very interesting fourth quarter because I totally thought that the 49ers had just everything locked up. When they got that second interception of Mahomes and it was 20-10 heading into the fourth quarter, I'm like, well, they're pretty much taking control of this of this game now. I don't think there's any way that the Chiefs are going to be able to come back. And then, whoa, they scored 21 points.
Well, you got to know by now, never count the Chiefs out, and I never do. But
Yeah,
there was the period middle of the third quarter where Mahomes was going back to pass and a fumble was forced, and he recovered his own fumble. Shortly after that, he threw an interception. And then after that, when the Chiefs were driving, his passes were going real low, almost like he was afraid of getting picked off again. And they negated a catch that was called a catch by Tyreek Hill. They ended up calling that back. And at that point in time, I was thinking, wow, they're really inside Mahomes' head right now. I don't think I've ever seen this.
Right.
Because he was not having a good stretch right there. At that point, I didn't think the 49ers had it won yet, but I definitely thought Mahomes was rattled.
Yeah.
And you could tell by his body language on the sideline that it wasn't going well.
Right.
And
right.
so at that point, I thought, well, I don't think this is a wrap. But if he doesn't figure it out right now, it's going to be. And, well, guess what? He figured it out, didn't he?
He sure did. And you know, I mean, I got to say also, I mean, just some huge blown coverages by the Niners in the fourth quarter. I mean, that when Tyreek Hill was wide open way down the field, I'm like, how did he get that open at that point? And then also that big run by Williams at the end. I mean, it's just like, wow, how did the defense let that happen? They're both two really, really bad plays by the defense that let.
Well, you know, I was going to say Richard Sherman is paying for it on social media for the last 3 days. He's hearing
sure
about
has.
it. But you know, the thing is, I read something this morning that I thought was really interesting, and they interviewed Sammy Watkins. And Watkins said that he wanted to thank Devontae Adams for providing the blueprint on how to beat Richard Sherman. He watched the NFC Championship game and said everything he needed to know was right there. And when he needed to pull that knowledge out of his ass and make a play, he did. And he said that he credited Devontae Adams for telling him what he needed to do. He didn't describe exactly what it was, but he said the blueprint for how to beat Sherman was right there, and it worked like a charm.
So tell me, Swami, what do you think? Do you think that Mahomes should have been named MVP, or do you think it should have been another player?
All right, look, I'm not going to begrudge Mahomes winning that because what he did by rallying the troops and pulling that win out, I mean, he's obviously the team leader, and so there's a lot to be said for that. He did exactly what he had to do when he had to do it. If I'm giving out the MVP award, I don't think there's any question Damian Williams won that.
Yeah, absolutely, man. 133 yards and 2 touchdowns, I think, is what he ended up with. Damian Williams looked like the guy that we thought he would be at the beginning of the season and just didn't turn out that way. But, boy, did he finish strong. And now looking to next year, man, I mean, I'm guessing he's probably going to be a third-round pick again. Do you think you would take a chance on Williams going forward?
Sure, absolutely. Absolutely I would. I still need to see a little bit more consistency maybe. But he made a believer out of a lot of people. And if you're Kareem Hunt right now, you got to be wondering, boy, there was my chance. I was the guy. And because I'm an idiot, this guy stepped in and just stole my thunder, man. That had crossed my mind a couple of times.
Yeah, and it'll also be interesting to see if LaShawn McCoy comes back because I'm guessing McCoy is probably going to retire at this point. He didn't even play.
Why was he inactive? Nobody's been able to tell me why because I didn't even notice that until Troy Aikman pointed out in the first quarter that LaShawn McCoy was inactive. And I thought, yeah, what's the reason for that? Was he hurt? Did they just decide they didn't need him? I never really heard a reason for why he didn't end up being active in that game.
Yeah, I mean, I'm guessing, you know, it's a long season, and he's been dealing with injuries for a while now. He'd been kind of on and off the field a lot. So I'm guessing, you know, it's just a process of getting old in the NFL, man. Your body can't take that pounding anymore. And, you know, I'm amazed that he did as well as he did this year because I was like, I was under the impression that he was done as a player, in the NFL, but he had a decent season. I mean, he did exceed my expectations for the season, but I don't know if he's going to be coming back next year.
I got to tell you, man, as a Dallas Cowboys fan, I didn't have any love for LaShawn McCoy for a long time, obviously, as a Philadelphia Eagle.
Right.
But the dude, he went to Buffalo. He made a few decent-looking plays with Kansas City, and he kind of won me over. So I thought it was kind of a shame that after this long career, semi-distinguished career of his, that he wasn't on the field at least for a play or two just as a token showing. So he felt like he earned that ring because he's going to get the ring, obviously.
Yeah.
But I don't know. The guy's done enough over the course of his career that I thought he kind of earned that, and it was too bad to see him not playing.
Yeah, and that is too bad. But yes, he does get the ring, so that's pretty awesome. So
yeah, sure. But when you're walking
with
around with that ring, one of my favorite stories of all time, Jim, if you don't mind me telling you.
Okay.
Is there was back in 2002, I was the best man at a friend's wedding, and they decided to get the wedding in San Diego on a boat that was cruising the harbor on the roof. And so the bride had a bunch of maidens of honor, and I didn't really know any of them. So there's big dinner on the boat afterwards, and one of the guys that was the husband of one of the maids of honor, we didn't even notice till we were sitting there eating dinner. This guy had a Super Bowl ring on, and we're like, who the hell is this guy? I don't know who he is. Now, I wish I could remember his name. It was Brian something. He was a receiver for the Redskins in '87, okay? He was like their third or fourth option guy. You didn't see much out of him. I believe that was the year Doug Williams led the Redskins to the Super Bowl win. Okay. And so he was sitting there kind of cocky and kind of a weird dude, standoffish. And so all these people were oohing and ahhing at his Super Bowl ring. And I looked over his stats, and he didn't do jack in the Super Bowl, but he's still parading around this thing. So he noticed I was wearing a Dallas Cowboys T-shirt, and he said, "So you're a Cowboys fan, huh?" And I said, "Yeah, I'm a Cowboys fan, lifelong." And he said, "Well, as a Redskin, I love to pick on Cowboys fans." He started ranting and raving about the sorry-ass Cowboys. And I just kind of laughed along. Okay. And then finally I pointed to his ring. I go, "Hey, that ring you got on your finger?" And he said, "Yeah." And I said, "That was a strike year, bitch." And he got real quiet.
Oh man, so that's pretty cool. That's cool.
Yeah, it was funny, man. I just kind of felt like I had to rub a little salt in the wound there because I don't know that he earned that ring like Timmy Smith and Doug Williams and Art Monk did, So quit acting like you did. Yeah. Anyway,
more just a positive circumstance that he was at the right place at the right time, and yeah,
exactly.
Now we could say he was on the Super Bowl champion Redskins. So looking at the other players that were in the Super Bowl, man, I mean, you got a lot. You got like Deebo Samuel, Patrick Mahomes, Travis Kelce, George Kittle. What the heck happened to George Kittle, man? He was like non-existent during the playoffs and the Super Bowl. He had 8 total catches for 72 yards, 0 touchdowns. That was crazy, man. I had him on the NFL playoff challenge, and he got me like 12 points total, even though I had him all 4 weeks and had quad points in the Super Bowl. That's it. That's all he got me.
Yeah, well, you know what, man? If you're smart and you're game planning for the 49ers, then Kittle is the first guy you put bodies on.
Right.
Even though Mostert had a great postseason. So, yeah, I think a lot of it was he's really the guy we got to worry about. And so they worried about him. But, yeah. I mean, look at the game Zeshek had. Nobody saw that guy coming. And if you're Kyle Shanahan, you got to think, well, they're going to key on Kittle. We better have some other options going on here. So I give Shanahan credit for spreading the ball around a little more because obviously he knew they were going to be keying on Kittle, and they did.
Yeah. So yeah, Jusiak. Next season, man, late season flyer. Do you pick him up and hold him on your bench to see what he can do?
No.
Nah.
No. I think the day of the fullback as a viable position in the NFL is long over.
Right.
The days of your Mike Allstats and your Tom Rathmans and your Darrell Johnsons, those don't happen anymore, really.
Right.
I mean, there's a few guys. But for the most part, yeah. If I see FB next to a running back's name, I'm not drafting that guy. No chance.
Well, he is going to be drafted next year. People are going to, because people always remember. That's the thing, man, about these players that are in the Super Bowl. Everyone's going to remember who these people are come the summer, and they're going to get bid up way higher on the draft board than they should be. And because of that, I like to stay away from those kind of players because usually they tend to fall back after a championship season. And it's so hard to get a team back to the Super Bowl that oftentimes they are a big disappointment fantasy-wise. And if you look at like the Rams players this season, man, I mean, it was just a letdown across the board of that whole team.
I found that out the hard way.
Yeah.
Found that out the hard way a couple of times because I had both Woods and Cooks. No, sorry, Kupp and Woods last year.
Right.
Before Kupp got hurt, they were killing for me. I had Brandon Cooks for almost half the season before I finally just dumped him. He didn't do anything for me.
Right.
But I'll tell you this, interesting little sidebar here. I thought that Deebo Samuel was downright electric at times in the Super Bowl. The speed that guy possessed and some of the ways they were using him, I liked him. However, I picked up Deebo Samuel off waivers week 2 or 3 and kept waiting for something to happen to give me an inclination that maybe I could put him in at wide receiver at some point, and that never materialized. And I ended up dumping him after a while because he really didn't do much.
Yeah, and you know that's the case with like a lot of rookie wide receivers. I mean, outside of DK Metcalf, there wasn't any that were started. Well, I guess DJ Moore also. Those two guys were startable on an extended basis, but otherwise. Oh, I'm sorry. Hold on. There we go. All right. So anyway, so what I want to talk about, man, is bounce back players for next season, guys that had a poor season in 2019, but should what I say revert back to better production. And a lot of these guys really suffered on the touchdown front. So I thought I'd start out, man, and talk about going to the Rams. Robert Woods, you know, statistically, he actually had a pretty good season. He actually did better than he did last year, but except for touchdowns. And his touchdown total, he only got 2 touchdowns this season, which just killed his fantasy value and really made him underperform his draft position. And so I can see him definitely reverting back to like a 6 or 7 touchdown season next year. And his usage is solid enough to make me think that this guy is going to be a great pick, like in the 4th, 5th round, which is where he's going to go next year. What do you think?
Well, I think the Rams have a lot of questions going into this offseason because obviously San Francisco is going to be around for a little while. There's no doubt about that. I think Seattle is going to be a player. There's no doubt about that. And they don't really need to make a lot of tweaks to be, you know, a viable contender for a Super Bowl. And I got news for you. Anybody who's sleeping on the Arizona Cardinals is just an idiot because I really believe Arizona, while I don't think they're good enough to suddenly eke out a 10-6 season and make the playoffs, they're going to be pesky and they're going to be good. And if Kyler Murray stays healthy, that's the best division in football. So the Rams, I
agree.
If they're careful, they could easily fall to the cellar of that division. I don't see that could happen.
Right. And yeah, the Arizona Cardinals, man, one of my favorite teams right now, looking at next season for picking up players because there is so much upside on that team because it's going to be a good, productive offense and a bad defense. And that just that equals shootouts and a lot of fantasy points are going to be scored. So yeah, I mean, Drake's on my radar. Kyler Murray's one of my favorite quarterback targets right now. So yeah, I totally agree with you there. But even so, yeah, toughest division in the NFL. But I can see Robert Woods being a good value next year at his, at where I think he's going to go, which is around pick number 50. So
if I'm looking over the wide receiver list right now, which I am, there's 2 people that I think are going to suddenly surge next year. Okay. And the guys that have been the go-to guys on that team are going to start tapering off. I think you're going to see Chris Godwin with Tampa Bay really emerge into he's going to come into his own. And Mike Evans is going to be somebody who might trail off a little bit. Same goes for Michael Gallup in Dallas. Well, I think Amari Cooper, should he get re-signed, might trail off a little bit too. Because I think both Gallup and Godwin are viable candidates to be number 1 receivers.
Right. And yeah, I really I do like Gallup very much for next season. Not so much on Godwin, mostly because of the uncertainty with the quarterback situation. I mean, are they going to retain him? Are they going to let him go? Right. If it's going to be a new quarterback, or perhaps they're going to they're going to pick up a free agent, that's going to hit his value. But yeah, Gallup, I love, man. That's a great choice. Yeah.
Well, there were a couple of no-brainer games for Tampa Bay that they probably should have won. I'm thinking of the game with Houston. I'm thinking of the game with Atlanta. There were a couple of games that a bounce goes their way, and suddenly they're in the conversation for the playoffs. So we might be having a really different conversation about Jameis Winston despite all the picks if Tampa Bay would have had a few bounces go their way and made the playoffs.
Yeah,
so I wouldn't be surprised if they find a way to keep him around one more year while they explore more options. So I'll bet you Winston ends up with Tampa Bay one more year.
Yeah, they might franchise tag him. I could see that happening. But the problem is, man, certainly it was a great fantasy year for Winston, and it was a contract year for Winston as well, which you don't see too often with quarterbacks. It's not very often when quarterbacks go to a contract year. They're usually extended the year before their contract year season. And the 30 picks, man, again, I think Jameis Winston is the next Ryan Fitzpatrick. He's going to be the guy that can do some amazing stuff on the field, but also just the most boneheaded, interception-filled nightmare production scenarios. And I think that Tampa Bay is going to need to figure out that he is not the guy that's going to get him to the Super Bowl. He's just not, because he's going to have that 6-interception game. He's going to do stuff like that.
If maybe we ought to be the guys to author the PPI league, and if you get points per interception, he's the number one draft pick.
Well, of course.
Yeah.
Or likewise, you just set the interception penalty to -5 points or something like that, and then his value goes way down.
Oh yeah. Exactly.
So yeah, I mean, another receiver who I really like, who I think is going to be much improved next year, just based on his production, and this is a controversial pick, but I think OBJ is going to be a great choice for next year because he's going to be a fantasy deal. He had 133 targets last year and somehow only ended up with 4 touchdowns. He had switched teams in the offseason, which is always a negative for me. I don't like to take those kind of players, but now he'll have a whole additional year with Baker Mayfield to improve their play and improve their chemistry. And I can see him, going end of the second round, early third round pick with certainly wide receiver 1 potential. We haven't seen it in a while from him, but I certainly think he could. He was also playing injured for much of the year. He had that core muscle surgery during the offseason now. So I think he's going to be in a lot better shape for next fantasy season. And like I said, I just love where he's probably going to go. And I think he could be a productive upside asset for your fantasy team next season.
What's the name of the dude that was coaching Cleveland this year that they fired? I'm brain.
Oh, Freddie Kitchens.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Now they've got a new coach.
Yes.
I just think Kitchens was helpless. He had to set up his ass. He was baby in the woods.
Well, I think he was just overwhelmed, man. I mean, they shouldn't have made him the head coach. He was not ready.
No doubt about it.
Yeah.
So they've fixed that problem now,
yeah.
presumably. I mean, it is Cleveland, so you take that with a grain of salt.
Yeah,
but
exactly.
Maybe now that they've got a guy who may have more of a clue of what he's doing with the offense and what he's doing with the team as the coach, maybe he figures out how to utilize him better, and that's the difference that you needed with him.
Yeah, yeah. So let's move on now. I got 3 running backs I want to talk about that I think will be strong bounce back candidates this year. All of them really down on their touchdown totals, just significantly down, just shockingly low. Leonard Fournette, who had only 3 touchdowns all season. Joe Mixon, who had only 5 touchdowns last season. And Le'Veon Bell, who had only 4 touchdowns. These guys, each of them had over 300 touches and targets, all right? I mean, we're talking true workhorse RB1 usage. And when it comes to fantasy, man, touchdowns are the hardest thing to predict. And whenever you see this sort of downside, underperforming touchdown totals, it's going to revert to a more normal, with this sort of usage, 10, 12, 14 touchdown seasons. And so with all of these guys, man, I think they're going to be bargains. Joe Mixon's probably going to be a first rounder, but I think Leonard Fournette and Le'Veon Bell are going to be late second round picks, guys that if you're picking first, that you come around, you get yourself another really good high upside running back. These Fournette and Bell, I think, are going to be great options for you next season. I think they will bounced back very nicely, especially in the touchdown department.
Okay. I can't argue with you on any of that stuff. All those guys disappointed like hell, but we know what they can do.
Yeah.
I wonder if Bell, I don't know, maybe Bell's getting to that shady point of his career where maybe age is going to take a toll. Playing for the Jets is going to take a toll. And maybe we've seen the best of him. It's hard to say. But I'll tell you this. I know we're not talking about this right now, but one person that I have a sneaky feeling is going to suddenly turn into a stud is Sam Darnold. Now, I don't know what they're going to do about wide receiver. I don't know what they're going to do about offensive line. The Jets got a lot of holes to fill.
Right.
But I saw enough out of Darnold this year that I get the feeling he's kind of ready to take the next step. And when he does, he's going to be good. He's going to be really good.
Yeah, and I mean, obviously, the biggest negative against Sam Darnold is Adam Gase, the coach.
Yep.
He's my least favorite coach in the NFL. I was hoping they'd fire him after this season. They didn't. He's going to be back. I'm really interested to see what happens in the draft because, yes, they do need to focus on offensive line, which was horrendous. And of course, focusing on the offensive line helps Bell as well. So, yeah. I mean, I think, as far as fantasy goes, no one's going to take Sam Darnold unless you're in like a 2-quarterback league. He will be the easiest, super easy quarterback to get. And if he can come out and do like what Tannehill did or something like that, he would be offer tremendous upside for your fantasy team next season for sure.
Oh, I'm telling you, I think him doing at least Tannehill well is a no-brainer. He's going to. Yeah,
and he certainly has the potential, and I'd love to see some success from the Jets. But man, with Adam Gase as coach, that's a tough call, man.
No, they're screwed. That was the worst hire I'd ever seen. I couldn't believe they hired him. You know, teams like the Jets and the Lions and the Browns just kind of seem to have a habit of every time there's a coaching vacancy, which is every other year,
right?
And they fill it. You're like, what?
Right.
Really? Okay. It's just all stopgap. Nobody wants to go there.
And I also talk about like the incestuous relationship among the AFC East teams where they, a coach leaves one of the teams and goes to one of the other teams in the same division. I'm like, what? Who is doing this? Why would you do this? But, It happens all the time with that division. I don't know what it is.
Yeah, something weird. But, in quarterbacks, it's a brave new world, man. I mean, obviously Lamar Jackson, Patrick Mahomes, Deshaun Watson, they're so good. They're so good.
Yeah.
And if they're sitting there, you got to take them.
Right.
But there's an elephant in the room that nobody's talking about. And I heard this theory earlier this week, reporter with the Dallas Morning News I follow. And so I subscribe to his column and I read his stuff a lot.
Okay.
And a theory he came up with, when I first read it, I was like, you got to be kidding me. And then the more I thought about it, I said, you know what? I'm not against that if that ends up happening. So what he says is that it's obvious to him that Dak Prescott and most of the points he produced this year were done in garbage time, coming from behind like they had to do all year long. Don't buy into fool's gold. Dak Prescott's not a $35 million a year guy. The team's permanently hamstrung if they do sign him to a contract like that. Therefore, what he proposes is let Dak go and then pick up Rivers on a 1-year deal and figure out the quarterback position sometime in the next year or two. Give yourself a decent chance at winning with Phillip Rivers and just let Dak go because you can write off the future if you sign Dak to that much money. And when I first saw that, I said, you're nuts. And then the more I thought about it, I was like, you know what? That's not the most insane thing I've heard.
Well, I got to say, man, I would not hire Rivers right now. He is he suffered a massive decline in his production over the past 2 seasons. And this is what you normally see when quarterbacks hit their mid to late 30s is when it starts to happen, man. Like Aaron Rodgers too, Eli Manning retired, Ben Roethlisberger. I don't think he's going to be a force or a factor when he comes back next year. These guys, they get to that age and they can't, their brain sees stuff that their body can't deliver on. So I don't know if that's a great idea. I would not like to see Rivers in a Cowboys uniform. I actually like Dak. I think he's an efficient quarterback, and I think he's a good choice. So he's an above average quarterback in this league, and that's hard to get.
Tied up a lot of money. You tied up a lot of money in Zeke Elliott. You're about to tie up a lot of money in Dak Prescott.
Right.
The team, meanwhile, is deteriorating rapidly. That legendary offensive line is getting old and banged up and expensive. And the defense has got a ton of free agents that are going to bolt because there aren't going to be available funds. You're going to be losing a lot of guys. You need to think about that.
Yeah.
And Dak's all right. I don't hate on Dak. And I certainly don't want Rivers as my quarterback going into the future for the next 2 or 3 years. But for 1 year, that's basically an admission that you've got some holes to fill, and you're not expecting to contend for real next year, which I think is true with the Cowboys.
Yeah.
So if that's what you got, if that's your bridge to the next era, then I can live with that.
Sure. So cool. Well, Swami, I know the football season is over, and you are all into your basketball and baseball, and so you are going to probably sign off till the summer when we start talking about the NFL season again. But I'd love to have you back a couple times during the next few months, like after the draft, talk about the players drafted and stuff like that. Would you be willing to come on in and talk?
Yeah,
Awesome.
sure. We'll figure it out. And I'll tell you this before I sign off too, for those who care, and there's probably not a whole lot who do. If Luka Doncic and Kristaps Porzingis can have relative amounts of health and be on the floor at the same time, semi-healthy, my Dallas Mavericks are a top 4 seed in the Western Conference this coming spring.
There you go.
Right
there you go.
There you go. All right.
Cool. Well, thank you very much, Swami. I appreciate you doing this podcast with me, and we will. I'll talk to you in April then when it comes time for the draft, and we can talk more players at that point. But in the meantime, we are going to continue doing. I am going to continue doing the podcast. Got lots of topics to talk about. Looking at the 2020 season, we've got OTAs and the combine coming up, and all sorts of stuff like that. So there'll be things to talk about. And this is my favorite. I love season, right? But I love the off season as well, because for me, it's all about the draft and figuring out the players and seeing, who is going to be the next Lamar Jackson, who's going to be the Lamar Jackson of next season, right? Is it going to be Kyler Murray, or is it going to be maybe someone else? There's a lot of things to look at. So we'll be having fun with that. And thank you, Swami. And for everyone else, keep checking us out. Please like and subscribe if you're watching this on YouTube, and have a great day, everybody.